Hey guys, welcome to Bouncing Thoughts. My name is Krystal, and this is my beautiful co-host Coralys. Coralys, say hi.
Hey guys, hey everyone.
Today we're gonna talk about Jonah Hill's documentary Stutz. It's Phil Stutz' last name. I found it super interesting, and I'm just gonna dive right into it. Um,
Go
the
ahead.
movie, Jonah Hill asks him, like, why do you want to do this? Or why do you think, right? Why does Jonah Hill's therapist think that he wants to do that? And it was such a simple and normal answer. I want to have my tools. He wants to make the tools accessible. And
For
although for
people,
someone
yeah.
like me and probably you, all this stuff is kind of repetition or like a different form of it. For the regular everyday person, this documentary was probably the first time they'd heard of a lot of these terms. So, especially because of the media that Jonah Hill is involved in. Like,
Of course. No, for sure.
yeah, yeah, his comedy is, it's Jonah Hill.
Yeah, he has a big following. He has a big following, and I'm sure
Yeah.
that the documentary reached a lot of people that were not exposed to therapy before and had no idea like what
Probably
any of
didn't
these
even know
tools
he went to
are.
therapy.
Right? Yeah, that too. Actually, that too. Beginning, yeah.
I thought it was
Um,
sweet that it was out of love too, like his love for his therapist.
I know it was that was a message that was repeated throughout the documentary a lot. Like he was doing it out of love, out of respect, out of admiration, and that he
Hmm.
truly believed in the tools that he had learned with Phil. So he wanted to help other people, and I think that's beautiful. I think that was a really great way to honor him because now
Hmm.
you have this documentary about him, and everyone, like, come on, a lot of people saw it, right? So
Yeah,
I think
and it
it's
was super
really
conversational. Um, it
very
was
genuine, I
informative,
thought.
but it was a conversation between them two. That's it.
Yeah.
The tools were introduced in their conversation, but it was nice. At the beginning of the docu, Jonah, I don't know why I want to call him Noah, but Jonah asked Phil, what does he ask people when that first therapy session? And I found this super interesting that the guy was like, why are you here? What do you want? Like,
Uh-huh.
super
Yeah.
straightforward because my experience, not at the moment, but previous experience with therapy, it's almost like they're walking on eggshells. Like,
I agree. Yeah. They're
yeah,
just kind of listening. They're just kind of waiting for you. And it's just a little bit, for
yeah,
me, the past has been uncomfortable because I'm just seeking that guidance, right? Like that's why we're
yeah.
there.
And they don't want
And
to
they're
give it
just,
to you.
yeah, it's like, okay.
So
So
I
I
found,
agree with that. Yeah. And when I
yeah,
saw it, I was like, oh, interesting.
he actually said that he was no longer neutral, that he believed that the
Yeah.
traditional therapy was long, like a lot of suffering for no reason, essentially, right? In other words, but that's essentially what he said. And although that's not my perspective of therapy, I completely understand why he views that. But his
I
approach is
agree
give
with
guidance.
Yeah, I agree with the thought of like, I really want to do something right now. Like, this person is hurting, this person
Mm,
is going through something. How do I help them right now? Because the reality is that, yeah, you know that in the long term, they're going to be better. And, if you give them these tools, or if you do this, or if you listen to them. But, like, I understand his perspective of being like, oh my God, this person is coming in miserable. How do I prevent them from leaving miserable? Like, I
yeah.
want to help them. I want to. So when he said that he really wanted to create these tools to make people feel like they could change at that moment,
Hmm.
right? I was like, oh, I understand. Yes, yes.
Yes. And he actually gave a definition. I wrote it somewhere. Yeah, wait. Of tool. He said that a tool is something that can change your state, your inner state, immediately in real time. It takes an experience that's normally unpleasant and it turns it into an opportunity.
Opportunity. Yeah.
And for someone that's been in therapy and has read a lot of self-help books, went to psychology, like in college or whatever, no one ever took the time to be like, this is what a tool is, or this is what I describe as a tool. So when I'm telling you, use this practice, this is the
Do
intention of
this.
it. Everybody's like,
Yeah.
meditate, journal, blah, 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 blah.
It's just
But
gonna
they
help
don't
you. You're
give
gonna
you
feel
a,
better.
yes. But he
Yeah.
actually was like, if you do this, it's to immediately change your inner state. And I was like, I'm going to take certain things more seriously now, just because he put it in that point of view that I hadn't looked at. I mean, now looking back, it looks obvious, but before he worded it like that, it wasn't.
I know.
I kind of, like, it's just another thing you have to do if you want to feel better, or like one of the options to feel better.
It makes it simpler and easier and more relatable, and it's like, oh, it's not so scary, to just like, it's more concrete. I feel like the first time I ever found a tool like that was through CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, because it makes you write down your thoughts and kind of like question it and try to change it to more positive perspective, right? So, but before that, definitely there were really no tools, like concrete tools that you could be like, hey, do this and you're gonna feel this, or meditate, like you said, because it's actually this effect and it has this result. So do it. And it's like, no, just do it because you're gonna feel better. It's like, well, it's too general. It doesn't really connect. Like,
no,
sure.
no. It and I believe in the power of them, but everything's easier said than done. But when you simplify it, he even goes into his note cards. The whole documentary on Netflix is illustrated by his own drawings. But his own drawings are images that he uses to explain something that people would see as complex in a simple way.
Very simple way.
And just so many things that I was like, wow, yeah, that makes sense, of course. But he even gives it, I only wish my therapist could give me like a little note card, like a reminder. And the way the universe works, you run into that card or you have it in your pocket or whatever at the right time. And I think that's his intention with it, like a reminder of, oh, remember what we talked about. And one of the first tools that he gives you is life force, which,
yes, I liked it. I had not seen it. I had not heard of the concept before or explained the way that he explained it.
Yeah.
And I related a lot to it because, in my life recently, I was in a place where I felt lost, where I felt like I had no direction. And I started getting better when I started kind of tending to my body and the relationship with other people, like the things that he said, but I had not seen it structured that way. So I was like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. The definition of you cannot help another person or others if you don't help yourself.
Yeah.
And the most simple
that relationship
pyramid.
To self. Oh my God.
Yes.
We're so complex. We're so scared of it. We don't want to do it, but it's so important.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he made it so simple. Like, if someone's super lost, the first thing I'm going to tell them is to exercise to make sure that they get, like, a task. Like, make sure you do these things. And then when we have this covered, we can move on to the next step, which is people, which I found interesting. Because, again, no one had explained it in the hierarchy. And, I don't know, and this is super random, but there's a thing in psychology called Maslow's hierarchy. And the top thing is self-actualization. And that's essentially what he's saying. But in the Maslow's hierarchy, there's like 6 different categories. And the first one is body. It's called something else, I don't know off the top of my head. But it's body. But they want to make it so technical and so ethically correct that I feel like it loses its message. Where Stutz,
I get that.
Jonah Hill's therapist, just like, eat, sleep, take care of your body, Once we do that, then move on to your people. And he described people as the handholds when you're rock climbing. And that really stood out to me. Yeah, because if you've ever been rock climbing, if you haven't, it's something you can easily imagine. It's not it's not a firm grasp. Like, it's there to help you, but you're not gonna be there a long time, right? The goal is to move on to the next one, and the probability of you falling from it is so high. So out of everything he could have compared it to, the fact that he compared people, relationships, I was like, this man is more genius than I freaking thought. Look at him. Yeah, because it's just, it's unstable.
Yeah, it is unstable. Yeah. It is unstable. That's how you get to really move forward, through the connections that you build. And if you stay, stuck at a place for so long, maybe you don't get to move forward. So yeah, I understand.
You gotta let go of that handle. Either move on to the next one, or you're gonna fall from it, right? That's why people say that, like, when someone gets removed from your life, not by choice, sometimes God was taking them out of your life. Well, you weren't letting go. So you have to fall off.
You need to let go. You're not letting go. We're gonna make you. Yeah, it happens. It happens.
If I could, I would go to a therapy session with him for this thing alone. I wrote it down. I literally put a little star by it.
Okay.
He said this one sentence, and not only that it stood out to me as someone, as a therapist, but as a person. He was like, I'm just a regular person, nothing unusual, except for one thing. I zoom into you, and I block out everything else. And I think that that's what connection is, right? That's why in reality, he helped Jonah Hills so much, because there was that connection. And it's not because he was looking for that connection. This is how he treats people. You came here to talk with me. I'm zoning everything else out to figure out you, and you came here for guidance. And I don't think it's on purpose, but a lot of people in the mental health field have a lot of shit going on in their own lives. And after you see 100,000 patients, it's just kind of like check a box.
Yeah, it can get overwhelming.
You said you don't sleep. Yeah. But he's like, I zone everything out and I zoom into you. And I was like, it sounds simple, but it has such an effect.
It takes you to a higher level, to that connection, that vulnerability, going deeper and really serving the patient how they need, and how they need to be supported. So,
yeah. And then it puts you at the same level as them, right? Because sometimes you go into therapy and you think that this person, it's not that they're above you, but they obviously have expertise in the field.
Of course.
And there's things that are going to come out of your mouth that they're going to know exactly what it is, even though you don't know what it is. So it's intimidating. But by him wording it like that, it's like, nah, man, I'm just another person. We're here having a conversation. But I'm actually paying attention to you, and I'm actually focusing on you. And he got a vote of confidence from me for that one.
After saying that, he actually explains that he believes that he had this gift with people from a very young age, because a lot of people used to talk to him, would approach him, and he listened. That was the reality. He really listened, he really cared, and he wanted to help.
Yeah, when he got to like a therapy session, he was like, it was like a joke. It was like changing a scenario, but I did the same thing. I was like, oof. Ah, man.
Like you said earlier, after many patients, it kind of all becomes the same.
And I imagine it's really way easier to see the patterns, right? Which is why he probably was able to dissect and create these tools leading on to the next one, which was Part X.
Oh, I liked Part X. I really liked Part X. Part X, when he described it, I was like, I had really not heard of it.
So did you like more how Stutz described it, or did you like more like Jonah described it?
I mean, I guess I gathered both definitions. I'm not sure if I separated them. What do you mean?
Because Stutz, obviously, he's a therapist or whatever he is, and he said like Part X is the judgmental, the antisocial part of you. The part of you that doesn't want you to grow and change.
It wants to block your evolution and your potential.
Yeah. And Jonah Hill was like, so basically, if your life is a movie Part X is the villain.
Villain. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
the analogy. Yeah.
But Stutz, I don't know if it was Jonah Hill or Stutz, but one of them like kind of proceeds building on it, and he's like, yes, but you need the villain. If there was no villain,
yeah, because Jonah asks
there'd be
him,
no
like, can you get
challenges.
rid of Part X? And he says, you
Mhm.
can't. You can't, because if you take out Part X, then there's no growth.
And there's no,
So yeah,
no
Part
challenges.
X is a villain, but you actually need it, because if you don't have a villain, you don't have anything to overcome. There's no growth. There's no story.
And I recently have truly started to believe that happiness is not the absence of problems, is the ability to solve those problems. And although villains and superheroes like a whole another, realm, it's the same thing, right? And someone that really, really struggles with mental health, depending on the disorder, they don't see a way out. They don't see a solution to whatever sadness, grief, anger. They either don't see it or they're so consumed by it.
They're overwhelmed by it. Yeah.
Yeah. And they become comfortable on it. But it's like a symptom, and you got to work on fixing that symptom. That doesn't mean you're broken. It just means that this is the challenge of the moment. And it's easy to get lost in that. But it's kind of separating it from you. And like, it's Part X. So every time you have a negative thought, it's like, oh, it's Part X talking.
I know. Yeah. It really helps to externalize that and not really believe so much, because like Jonah said at some point when he was saying his story, because of the things that he had gone through, he believed he was bad, right? Like there was something wrong with him. And that is what Part X is about, making you feel like you're the problem and you're not. So whenever these thoughts come up, you can be like, oh, Part X. Chill.
Shut up, Part X. Yeah. Imagine like the little devil in your shoulder, like back in the movies, and just like.
And it's not so much you're bad, it's just, Part X acting up.
Yeah. And it doesn't seem like it, but I thought about Part X as what Sigmund Freud would call the ego, right?
Okay.
And I feel like because of society and just the overuse of the word, like with the word bitch, like I use it all the time, but in reality it's a negative word that women have taken over and kind of empowered themselves with.
Yeah.
But with the ego, I think in a way people have found like technology allows us to inflate it so much and listen to it too much. It's that instant gratification. But if you separate it from you, it's no longer my ego. It's this Part X. You can be like, that's what you want, but I can do better. So that at least helped me
manage it a little bit better.
At least that's some comparisons that I had. And then his 3 realities of life, I think it was, or 3 aspects of reality.
3 aspects of reality: pain, uncertainty, and constant work.
Yes.
It's true. It is true. And what makes you happy is learning how to enjoy the process and accept that those are part of life.
Part of it. Yeah. Yeah. He literally, I think, he verbatim said, if you don't accept that in your life, you're going to have pain, constant work,
and uncertainty. You can't know everything.
Uncertainty, you're gonna be unhappy. Like you're 100% gonna be unhappy.
It doesn't matter what goal you're trying to reach. If you don't be at peace with those 3 things, you're not gonna be happy.
And then he compared it, or kind of used the analogy of. Actually, I don't think it was an analogy. It might have been like a separate part. So maybe if I'm jumping ahead, stop me.
Okay.
But when he talked about the snapshot, right?
Yeah.
To me, the snapshot is like the complete avoidance of the 3 realities of life.
100%. 100%. So that's where he's talking about it, because he's like, yeah, you might reach this fantasy or whatever story you've told yourself of how you're going to be successful, but holding on to this idea that pain, uncertainty, and constant work are not going to be part of your life you're gonna be holding on to things that are gonna make you
You're
unhappy.
not living in reality, basically.
Mhm. Yeah.
Which, wow. Um, I wrote something about that. He talked about how that snapshot, right? Like a little, let's say screenshot for now. Like the screenshot is a photo and it has no motion and no depth.
Because it's something that you created in your head. It's not
And
real.
I think that's when he worded it like that, it literally exploded my brain because I have a lot of wealthy people, and like I know a lot of wealthy people, and I
Okay.
think of people my age that their biggest goal in life was to, I don't know, buy a certain car
Mhm.
or go to a certain place, whatever it may be, whatever their snapshot of choice was, right? And I'm not a materialistic person, so I knew that that doesn't bring you happiness. But I thought it was interesting that he described it by not having depth or motion. So you're literally, your goal in life is like if you took a movie and paused it. Like,
Yeah.
like there is, let me see what I'm trying to get, like how to word what happened in my brain.
The
It's
thing is that
basically,
you're not, there's no death because you're trying to escape, right? You're just
mm-hmm,
trying to create this fantasy based on things that may not necessarily happen or are not necessarily part of life, right? Like it's
yeah,
your perfect reality, but that perfect reality does not exist because the pain is still going to be there, because the struggle is still going to
mm-hmm.
be there, because life is still going to be there. So
And Jonah
everything that
Hill.
you're avoiding, you're not accepting, it's still going to be there even though you run away from it and you create whatever you want. No, it's going to
Mm-hmm.
be there.
Jonah Hill when he
So
got to fame.
that's what he said. Yeah, he got to fame and
Mm-hmm.
he got everything that he wanted, and he was still.
The 14-year-old. They did. I loved the cutout. I loved it.
Yeah.
Because that's the Jonah Hill that I remember. Like when I first watched the documentary, like that was, who is this person? Right? I
Uh
don't
huh.
watch all his stuff, so. But the 14-year-old cutout, I mean, I'm sure the movie that I watched, he was older than 14. But that version of him is the one that I remember.
Yeah.
And him and the therapist have such a good dynamic, which is super important. But I think that they both deal with their traumas through comedy. And
Yeah.
he hated himself so deeply because of his physical aspect, which sounds dumb, but it really isn't. It really, really, really isn't. How you look
You're
at
stuck with
yourself in a
yourself every,
mirror is so,
yeah.
yeah. But imagine having all the money in the world, all the resources, connections, whatever, that you can live wherever you want, you can travel wherever you want within reason, and you hate yourself. He said that he didn't meet Stutz till he was like 33, I think it was.
Mhm. So
And
imagine,
that,
yeah,
yes.
how many years, how many decisions, how many things, how many experiences. I know, it's a lot. It tells you a lot. We
Then
really gotta go deep
the
within
string of
ourselves.
pearls.
I really like the string of pearls. I hadn't thought about it that way, you know? Let
No,
me look
he
for it in
just,
my
I
notes.
guess, simplifying it.
Yeah,
Um,
every action, I like that every action has the same value, right? So as long as you're doing something, move on to the next thing. It doesn't have
mhm.
to be perfect. It doesn't have to be, the best thing. Just get it done and move on to the next. And just add another pearl to the string. I think it was
He's
really,
simple
yeah.
but profound. And I think that my mom used to say something similar to me growing up, right? Growing up in a chaotic household. My mom was more on the religious side, and she'd always tell me that every day was a page in a book, and that every night you got to write the end of the story however you want it. And the
Okay.
next morning, you got to restart, like you flip the page and you have to restart, right? And although it's not the string of pearls, it's the same idea. Um,
Yeah,
because
just
motion
keep
is
going.
important.
Yeah, just
Yeah. I feel
persistence.
like he said something at the beginning that wasn't about that, but it's directly, where is it? He said, forward motion gives people hope. So
When he's talking about tools, yeah.
I always knew that, like, you just gotta start. You just gotta start doing it. You just gotta start planning or moving or whatever it is. But I never thought about it in the sense of it gives you hope, right? But it's not hope as the hope that you're gonna get cured or anything of that. It's just like the hope of possibility. The hope that maybe, look, I already did this one thing.
You can
I
do
can
the
do the
other
next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can do the
Simple,
other
but
one. You can
profound.
keep going. The thing is, whenever, for example, you're depressed, you know, a lot of things, you kind of get paralyzed, right? So a lot of things stop and a lot of things don't work. And when you get
Part
stuck
X
in that
takes over.
mentality, yeah. So when you get stuck in that mentality, it's very easy to just continue, you know, that laziness or procrastination or just not doing anything. You don't want to do anything because there's no motivation. But the thing is, motivation is not going to come out of nowhere. You need to start. You need to do the thing. You need to take the first step and then the next step and then the next step and build on that. And you will get there.
Yeah.
You will get there. But just starting when you're in such a low point can be really, really hard. So,
just getting out of bed.
And like Jonah said, right, at the beginning of the movie, they're both like, oh, we struggle for different reasons. So,
oh, yeah.
Like, the Parkinsons, like, it really
so limiting.
22. Like, 22
Yeah, he got it so young. And in my opinion, he's solid. He's solid for having
lived
Parkinsons
a life,
since
right?
22.
Yeah. What a life.
It's a super debilitating condition.
It is. And
so,
which is why Jonah asks, like, oh, do you think having a medical issue like this, you know, grants you a lonelier life, something like that? And he's like, yes, right? Because he is limited and there's not a lot of things that he can do because of it. But he, at the same time, he says, oh, but something along the lines like, it's how I know the things that I know.
It's what led me to sit in this chair with you.
Exactly. So, you know,
enjoy the process. What is it? The uncertainty. You got to live with the uncertainty. And in the conversation between them, I don't know if you noticed, because eventually they got into both of their brothers passing away. But when the therapist first brought it up to Jonah, he shut it down. He was like, absolutely not. And that's, in my opinion, where Phil Stutz decides to be vulnerable. And in this moment, I don't have to be his therapist. He can talk to me, and he starts telling him how his brother died. He was 9 and his brother was 3 years old.
I know.
And he talks about how he believes that it was a mistake that his parents didn't, like, explain to him that he had, like, I think it was a bacteria or a tumor or something like that. Yeah, like, one day his brother was there, then he was gone. His mom, when she
they
came
denied
home
it.
from the
Not denied it, but like,
yeah. They just, and I really related to him because, I mean, thankfully, my experience with grief was in such a young age, which I imagine had a fundamental impact on this man. But when my dad died, the next day, my mom made me stay home, but the next day after I went back to school. And that's what he did. He was talking about how he asked his mom, can I go to school? And his mom was just so unable to be a parent at that moment because of her own
you can do whatever
grief.
you want.
Yeah. And he's like, so I did. And it was part of my denial. And I was like, ooh, I feel you. I did the same. I wonder when he actually processed that grief. Right? Because when you do that, you're not feeling it. You're not processing it. And another thing that stood out to me, or I related to, is that he said that at that moment his childhood was over.
Oh, I know.
And that everything had a double meaning. And I never thought about it that way. I always thought of my poor mom being the most strict and like just annoying, right? Like what teenagers and parents be fighting about.
We're not really thinking,
Yeah, but he was like, it was a double meaning because now when I didn't get home at that time that I said I was going to go home, They went crazy because they thought something happened to me. And again, something that now looking back, like, yeah, of course. But no, it wasn't obvious back then. Because I'm not thinking of, in my case, my dad's death. But obviously my mom was. And he wasn't thinking of that when he went to his games, but his parents were. And going back to how he said that most people always talked to him and opened up to him growing up, in my personal opinion, I think it's because how he described his mom. So when he starts describing his parents, he goes, my dad was an extrovert, he was an entertainer,
he loved people.
If it were up to him, my house would always have people, and my mom hated it.
She was a complete opposite.
Yeah, she only wanted to read. She said
she didn't like his reality. Her reality.
No. And this is the part that like stuck to me. She said that life was too painful.
So she would focus on books.
Yeah. And as a kid who obviously has love for his mom, like that empathy and that vulnerability, or what's the right word? Reception? Is that the right word? Like the ability to have people come and be this vulnerable with you. I feel like that's where it was born. And I might be very wrong. I'm sure that he had a million reasons to become a therapist. But I did think it was because they weren't really into the mom, because she was an activist. She was an activist against men, actually.
Which was a lot for him as well, because she essentially hated men, and he was a man.
Mm-hmm.
So growing up, imagine, like, this is really interesting. Like, he lost his brother, so he lives in definitely a broken home in a way, right, because of this loss.
Mm-hmm.
His parents are not dealing with it. They're in denial. They're not really tending to him. And his mom essentially hates who he is. Like, he, at some point, he said, like, she made him feel like he had no right to do whatever he was doing. And it was like...
And it made him insecure around women.
He couldn't form a relationship with women, like a woman. Like,
and what really
he wouldn't feel safe.
No. How can you? And he said that he didn't even realize, like, oh shit, I'm a man. Until he was like 13, 14.
Yeah.
Like, imagine you low-key have this hatred against men because your mom is this activist. She had her reasons, but, you know, was an activist against men, and you have that realization of, wait a minute, I'm a man. Like, that must be a hard truth to swallow. But I do think that
as a teenager,
yes. And it obviously affected his romantic relationships because they go into it. And he said that he had been in an on and off relationship for 40 years.
40 years.
40 years is a long time.
40 years. Like, he never made a commitment. And when Jonah asked, was it because of her or him? He was like, no, it's me. You know, I'm the one who struggled.
I'm sure his Parkinsons had a lot to do with it, too.
Of course. Not, I mean, a lot of his background.
Yeah, but it all starts in childhood. We want to admit it or not, it all starts in our developing years. And he turned it into art, right? He turned his chaos and pain into an art because he became this. Because I looked him up. This is not his first documentary. Well, maybe his first documentary, but he's definitely done countless of talks throughout his years. So he turned something that most people with Parkinson's, they kind of, in their head, their life ended. And none of his work had technically anything to do with Parkinson, but it has to do with his life experiences, his limitations. He goes into the maze. I love the maze analogy. Love.
Yeah,
like,
I agree.
And his little drawing made it even simpler. I was like, sir, you're a genius.
You get stuck in the maze.
Have you ever seen the movie Maze Runner?
I have not.
Oh, watch it. But I'm gonna spoil it a little bit. It's obviously they're in a maze. Think of like Hunger Games.
Yeah,
right, but they got dropped in a maze.
Yeah,
and although he's talking about the maze being like the part that you're trapped because of part X, I really kind of visualized it with that movie. How like part X are these humans that are control, or I don't even know if they were humans, right? I think they were humans that were controlling them in this like experiment, or like the Hunger Games. Think of like the rich people, like those are your part X, and you are this person fighting to get out of this maze, this race, this survival, right? So I know that he probably hasn't seen the movie, but
I really haven't. But I like that he said that it always involves other people. Because it's a product of part X that wants fairness. And if you keep, and like he says, when people keep holding on to that grudge of, oh, I can't be until this happens, until they make up for it or whatever, you know, you get stuck in the maze because you're just waiting for other people to make you feel better or to do something so that you can move forward. And what are you going to do? You're going to lose your life? Yes, people lose their life
literally.
like this.
They literally do.
Yeah.
It's sad, but a sad reality. Oh, and the talk to your shadow, I think that, I don't know if that stood out to you, but from reading that book that I'm currently reading, No Bad Parts, it's all about how the mind is multiple, right? There's a multiplicity to your mind. And even though he calls it a shadow, right? The book that I'm reading calls it a part. It's the same idea. Like when you're going through these triggering moments, take a minute, pause, and talk to your shadow. In my book part, it doesn't need the attention from, I don't know, your boyfriend, your friend. It needs your attention.
Yeah.
In Jonah Hill's case, it was a 14-year-old obese kid that he kept ignoring because he hated him, because he didn't want to be him. But in reality, he wouldn't be who he is without that 14-year-old boy.
It takes a lot to get to that point, though. Whenever you are first recognizing this part or this shadow, it's a lot, because it's like you said, it's the part that you're ashamed of. It's the part that makes you feel inferior or rejected. So it's not easy.
I like the word part better than shadow.
Yeah. I do think it's a good exercise, though, because it definitely helps you get to know yourself better, to meet yourself, and acceptance. That
separation.
You know? Yeah, and like just really accept who you are and know that, that you have this part of you, but there's also good, and that's what matters. Duality. We're not all perfect.
We think we are, but far from it. And then he goes into active love, which is one of the last things we're going to talk about because we're running out of time. But active love, as someone that even a year ago or a year and a half ago, I still think I was so consumed by anger, right? Because I was looking for that fairness in the world. That doesn't exist, okay? The world is not black and white. It's gray.
50-50.
So he doesn't word it like this, but when he was talking about active love, all I could think about was kill them with kindness. And the way that I viewed it is that you have to live your life in active love, because whenever you perceive negativity or anger or anything bad coming towards you, 85% of the time, it has nothing to do with you, and completely about the other person.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
When someone says a negative comment to you or something that triggers you, right? Because sometimes pass you, but if it triggers you, take a minute, talk to your shadow or your part, but be kind and kill them with kindness and love, because they're probably saying that to themselves and not you. And you don't have to stoop to their level to
exactly.
or
try to or change who you are. Like if you are acting with love, if you know that you are not this whatever they're telling you, like, you know, just act with love, just be genuine with yourself. And if they make you feel bad in any way, why are you returning, you know, the same thing? Be better in that sense, right? Like, kill them with kindness. 100%. I agree.
Did you like Jonah Hill's mom's part?
I thought it was interesting. I am not sure if I would be able to have a conversation like that. At least at this.
That was my immediate thought.
But I thought it was difficult for both of
For
them.
both of them. And then he made it super awkward
was-
for the therapist talking about the joke that he had made the day before.
Yeah.
I was like,
I
stop
liked her comeback,
deflecting.
though.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Oh, she was spicy. I liked her personality. I would be friends with her. But
yeah,
you could tell that
my
both of
hat's
them
off,
were,
'cause, like, oof.
yeah, you could tell both of them were like walking on eggshells. And that's what I imagine it would be like for me if I went through therapy with my mom, which, don't get me wrong, it did inspire me to talk to her about certain things that I do think that she'd be willing to talk about.
Okay.
But like what really stood out to her was when he said that her having an issue with his weight, even though it was for his health, it was because she knew what she had gone through. So, right, it's coming from a place of love, or at least
protecting him. She thought she could protect him from something. Yeah.
To him, it translated to this female figure. Yeah, not accepting me, but it more is like that female figure not accepting me. And I think that must have been really hard for that mom to swallow. Like, it must have been.
She even said it. She even said it. Thank you, because you had never articulated it like that. I think it was a lot to hear.
Yeah, a lot to hear. So I hope that everyone watches this docu. I recommend it. I think it's a super accessible way to have an insight to what therapy should be. Not everybody uses the same tools, but from my experience, they're all kind of the same, different names.
Oh yeah, it's kind of all the same.
And that it inspires us to have those kind of conversations. Not only with people, but with everyone. Because like the therapist got therapized.
Heavily.
But in reality, they were just having a normal conversation.
But they were getting intimate, which is part of it, right? Because the thing is, not all conversations get that intimate. So it's about having to, taking that extra step and just digging deeper.
So if you don't click with your therapist, switch her. If you're like me, give them a little bit of time. It's probably me. That dynamic between them, I think, is the thing that lacks the most in therapy. And
you need to have that connection.
Yeah. Halfway through the docu, I don't even think it was halfway, like a quarter in, they stop it, and basically he takes off the wig. He talks about how they've been doing it for a few years and that it all seemed like a sham. But what stood out to me from that part was the fact that Jonah Hills said, I felt like I was paying to lie to you, and it made me feel super alone. And I think that a lot of people, including myself,
have felt that way.
Yes. And if you make the step of I need help or I want help and I'm gonna go to a therapist, like, man, just say it. You know what I mean? It's harder said than done. But if you don't, you're doing what Jonah Hill did. You're paying to lie to someone, and you're only gonna hurt yourself more, because it is isolating. Because now you're in this program. That's the whole purpose of it, is to help.
And at the end of the day, they are there to help you. Exactly, they're there to do a service. So be honest. It's your time to be honest, to speak to. It's about you. So yes, speak up for yourself and say, hey, this is not really working out for me. Hey, I don't really like this, or whatever, right? Just speak whatever you feel.
Try it out. And let us know.
If not, just keep going. Find another therapist, or find books. There's so many resources right now that we can really get.
Books have really helped me and Coralys.
Yes,
we can do a whole other podcast on book recommendations.
Exactly.
Yeah. But thank you for joining me. This was fun.
Thank you so much.
For those watching, go watch Stutz on Netflix. And
highly recommend it.
Subscribe.
Let us know what you think in the comments. Bye.
Yes, let us know. Bye.